The massive space station hung in the void like a crystal flower. Nexus Prime had been the center of galactic power for over 10,000 years. Today, every important species in the galaxy had sent their leaders here for an emergency meeting. Admiral Sarah Chun walked through the long corridors of the station. Her black uniform looked simple next to the flowing robes and glowing energy forms of the other delegates. At 45 years old, she had gray streaks in her dark hair and tired lines around her eyes. She had been fighting wars for most of her adult life. The meeting hall was enormous. The ceiling stretched up so high that clouds formed near the top. Thousands of delegates filled the curved seats that spiraled down toward the center platform. Chun found her seat in the human section. It was small and placed far from the center, showing exactly what the galaxy thought of. Humanity. At the center of the hall stood three beings that commanded respect from every species present. These were the Elders, the oldest and most powerful. Races in the galaxy. Crystal Larch, HFY of the Viethians, looked like a living mountain of blue crystal. Light moved through his body in slow, hypnotic patterns. His people had been spacefaring for over 1,000,000 years. They had survived by being careful, by thinking before acting, by never taking foolish risks. Beside him floated bright speaker Lumara of the Lasari. She had no solid body, just pure energy contained in a roughly human shape. Golden light pulsed where her heart might be. Her voice sounded like music when she spoke. The Lugsari were beings of pure thought and energy. They had transcended physical form 500,000 years ago. The third elder was Hive Prime Zarthul of the Zirathi. His insect-like body was covered in chitinous armor that gleamed like black metal. But Zarthul was not just one being. He was connected to billions of Zirathi across the galaxy, all thinking as one mind. When he spoke, it was with the voice of an entire species. These three races had guided the galaxy through wars, plagues, and disasters that would have destroyed younger civilizations. They had earned their place as leaders through wisdom gained over millions of years. But today, even the elders looked worried. Crystal Arch HFY stepped forward. His voice boomed through the hall like distant thunder. Fellow beings of the galaxy, we face our greatest threat in recorded history. The Devourers have entered our galaxy. A wave of fear rippled through the assembled delegates. Chun had heard the reports, but seeing the reaction of species that had lived for millennia told her how serious this really was. 17 star systems have already fallen, HFY continued. The Devourers consume everything. Planets, ships, space stations, even the stars themselves. They turn all matter into more of their kind. They are a plague of machines that knows only hunger. Images appeared in the air above the platform. Chun watched in horror as entire worlds were stripped down to their cores by swarms of black machines. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were reduced to raw materials in a matter of hours. Bright speaker Lumara's voice sang out like a sad melody. We have studied their patterns. The Devourers move in a straight line toward the galactic core. They do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They simply consume and grow stronger. Hive Prime Zarthul spoke with the combined voice of billions. Our fleets have engaged them 12 times. Each battle has ended in defeat. Conventional weapons barely slow them down. They adapt to our tactics within hours. Chun leaned forward. In her seat, this was worse than the intelligence reports had suggested. If the elders were admitting defeat, the situation was truly desperate. Crystal Arch HFY raised one massive crystal arm. But we have a plan. The Council of Elders has developed a strategy that will save our civilization. Hope flickered in the eyes of the assembled delegates. These were the Elders, after all. They had guided the galaxy through every crisis for millions of years. We will perform a strategic withdrawal to the galactic core, HFY announced. All military forces will fall back to defensive positions around the core worlds. We will establish an impenetrable barrier using our combined technologies. The Devourers will exhaust themselves on the outer rim, and we will survive to rebuild. Shun felt her heart sink. She looked around at the other delegates, expecting to see outrage, but instead saw nodding heads and relieved expressions. They were actually agreeing to this plan. She stood up. What about the 17 billion people living in the systems you want to abandon? The hall fell silent. Thousands of eyes turned to look at the human who dared to question the elders. Shun felt the weight of their stares, but did not sit down. Crystal Arch HFY's crystal body dimmed slightly. Their sacrifice will be remembered. But we cannot save everyone. Sometimes the few must be given up to save the many. 17 billion is not a few, Chun said, her voice carrying clearly in the silent hall. These are entire civilizations. Families, children. You're talking about genocide. Bright Speaker Lumura's light pulsed gently. Young Admiral, your species has been part of this council for only 50 of your years. You have not seen what we have seen. Sometimes retreat is the only path to victory. And sometimes, Shun replied, retreat is just another word for giving up. The insult hit the hall like a physical blow. Delegates gasped and whispered among themselves. No one spoke to the elders this way. Hive Prime Zarthel's black eyes fixed on Shun. What would you have us do, human? Your species has been spacefaring for less than 300 years. You have fought in exactly 2 galactic conflicts. What wisdom can you offer that we, with our millions of years of experience, have not already considered? Chun walked down toward the center platform. Security drones moved to intercept her, but HFY waved them away with one crystal hand. You want to know what I would do? Sean asked. I would fight. I would take every ship, every weapon, every soldier we have, and I would hit these Devourers so hard they would remember it for the rest of their mechanical lives. Laughter echoed through the hall. Not cruel laughter, but the gentle amusement of adults watching a child play at being a warrior. With what weapons? Bright Speaker Lumara asked kindly. With what tactics? We have tried direct assault. It failed. Then we try something else, John said. My people have some experimental technologies. Weapons and systems that your people would probably consider too dangerous to use. Exactly, Crystal Arch HFY said. Too dangerous. Young species always believe that more violence is the answer to every problem. But we have learned that survival requires wisdom, not recklessness. Chun reached into her jacket and pulled out a data pad. I have a proposal. A plan for a coordinated strike using human technology combined with ships from volunteer species. We hit their command structures, disrupt their coordination, force them to fight on our terms instead of theirs. She tossed the data pad onto the platform. It clattered loudly in the silence. Hive Prime Zarthil examined the pad with mechanical precision. After a long moment, he looked up. This plan would require ships to operate deep behind enemy lines. The casualty rate would be enormous. The chance of success is minimal, but there is a chance, Chun insisted. A foolish chance, HFY rumbled. This is exactly the kind of reckless thinking that gets entire species destroyed. We did not survive for millions of years by betting everything on desperate gambles. The vote was swift and decisive. Every elder species voted for the withdrawal plan. Most of the younger species followed their lead. Only humanity and 3 minor species voted for Chun's proposal. As the session ended, Crystal Arch HFY approached Chun. His massive form towered over her, but his voice was almost gentle. Admiral Chun, I understand your frustration. Your species is young and brave. But bravery without wisdom is simply suicide. Follow our lead in this. Let us guide you as we have guided so many others." Chun looked up at the crystal being who had lived for thousands of years. "With respect, Crystal Arch, you've been guiding the galaxy for millions of years. And every few thousand years, something like this happens. Another crisis, another threat, another retreat. Maybe it's time to try something different." She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she heard Bright Speaker Lumara's musical voice. "Where are you going, Admiral?" Chun paused at the doorway and looked back at the assembled might of galactic civilization. "To save those 17 billion people you just wrote off. Humanity respectfully withdraws from your defensive strategy. We'll handle this ourselves." "They—" Hall erupted in shocked whispers as Chun walked out. Behind her, she heard Hive Prime Zarthul's mechanical voice cutting through the noise. "They are going to their deaths, and they will take anyone foolish enough to follow them." Chun smiled grimly as the doors closed behind her. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was suicide. But at least they would die fighting instead of hiding. Sometimes, she thought, the Elders' greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. They had survived so long by avoiding risks that they had forgotten how to take them. But humanity was different. Humanity had always been willing to bet everything. On impossible odds. Today, they would find out if that was enough. The communication channels buzzed with frantic messages as Admiral Chun's shuttle approached the human fleet. Every major species in the galaxy seemed to have an opinion about humanity's decision to go it alone. "This is madness," came the crystalline voice of a Vethian fleet commander. "The humans will be slaughtered within days." "Perhaps that is for the best," replied a Luxari energy form. "Their recklessness could have infected other species. Better they learned their lesson now." Chun switched off the communications array and focused on the sight before her. The human fleet hung in space near the edge of the Kepler Nebula, 300 ships strong. They looked tiny compared to the massive Elder fleets that were already pulling back toward the galactic core. But these were not ordinary ships. Chun had spent the last 10 years pushing human military technology beyond what most species considered safe. While the Elders perfected weapons that had worked for millions of years, humans did what they did best. They experimented with the dangerous and impossible. Her flagship, the U's Defiance, was a perfect example. From the outside, it looked like a standard heavy cruiser. But inside, it carried weapons and systems that made Elder engineers nervous. Quantum tunneling torpedoes that could phase through any known shield. IA-guided fighters with computer brains that learned and adapted in real time. A fold space drive that could jump the ship anywhere in a star system in seconds. "Admiral on deck," called Captain Torres as Chun entered the bridge of the Defiance. Marcus Torres was one of her oldest friends, a stocky man with graying hair and scars from a dozen battles. He had commanded destroyers in the Outer Rim conflicts and cruisers in the Centauri Wars. "Status report," Chun said, settling into her command chair. "All ships ready for departure," Torres replied. "Though I have to ask Sarah, are we really doing this? Taking on an enemy that destroyed 47 civilizations with just 300 ships?" Chun looked at the tactical display showing the approaching devourer swarms. The nearest group was still 3 days away from the first inhabited system in their path. A world called New Geneva, with 4 million colonists who had no way to evacuate in time. The Elders want to save themselves by sacrificing everyone else, Chun said. "I can't accept that. Can you?" Torres was quiet for a moment. "No, I can't. But Sarah, the math doesn't work. The Devourers have thousands of ships. They've been consuming resources from 17 star systems. Our intelligence says they're building more of themselves every hour. Then we better stop them before they get stronger," Chun replied. She activated the fleet-wide communications. All ships, this is Admiral Chun. In 5 minutes, we jump to the Vega system to intercept the Devourer advance force. 300 human voices acknowledged the order. Chun could hear the fear and uncertainty in some of them, but also determination. These were volunteers, every one of them. When the council had voted for retreat, she had given every human officer the choice to follow Elder orders or join her desperate mission. 70% had chosen to stay with her. The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind the Elder forces that were already forming up for their long retreat to safety. 3 hours later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vega system. What they found there would haunt Chun's dreams for the rest of her life. Vega 4 had been a thriving agricultural world with 2 million inhabitants. Now it was gone. Not destroyed, consumed. The planet was a hollow shell, its core mined out and converted into raw materials. Swarms of black ships moved through the debris field, processing the remains of a civilization into more Devourer units. Jesus Christ, whispered Torres. They're like locusts. Chun studied the tactical display. The Devourer force was larger than expected, over 800 ships of various sizes. But most of them seemed focused on the consumption process. Only about 50 ships were in defensive positions. All fighters launch, Chun ordered. Torpedo boats form up for attack runs. Capital ships begin the approach. Let's see what these things are made of. The battle was unlike anything the human fleet had ever experienced. The Devourers did not use energy weapons or projectile cannons like most species. Instead, they fired clouds of microscopic machines that ate through ship hulls like acid. Their ships moved in perfect coordination, never colliding, never getting in each other's way. But the human weapons worked. The quantum-tunneling torpedoes phased right through Devourer shields and exploded inside their hulls. The AI fighters adapted to enemy tactics faster than any living pilot could manage. And the human ships used their fold space drives to appear and disappear around the battlefield like ghosts. Chun watched as the destroyer Hampton materialized inside a cluster of Devourer ships and fired all weapons at point-blank range before jumping away. The explosion took out 3 enemy vessels. They're trying to surround us, reported Lieutenant Kim from the tactical station. Let them, Chun replied. Execute Pattern Delta 7. Pattern Delta 7 was a maneuver that no sane military academy would teach. The human ships scattered in all directions, making themselves impossible to surround, then used their fold space drives to converge on the enemy from 12 different angles at once. The Devourers had never faced anything like it. Their perfect coordination began to break down as they tried to track targets that could appear anywhere in the system without warning. We're actually winning, Torres said, disbelief clear in his voice. That was when the Devourers adapted. Chun watched in horror as the enemy ships began to change. Their hulls shifted and flowed like liquid metal. New weapons appeared, firing bursts of energy that somehow tracked the human ships, even through fold space jumps. They're learning, Kim reported. Every time we use a tactic, they develop a counter for it. The tide of battle turned quickly. The human fighters found their AI systems being hacked and turned against them. The quantum torpedoes suddenly stopped working as the Devourers developed new shield frequencies. The fold space drives began to malfunction as the enemy somehow jammed the quantum fields. All ships retreat to Rally Point Alpha, Chun ordered. Emergency jump now. The surviving human ships jumped away, leaving behind 30 destroyed vessels and over 6,000 dead crew members. Chun stared at the casualty reports and felt the weight of every lost life. But as the fleet regrouped near a distant asteroid field, Chun noticed something the Elders had missed. The Devourers had not simply reacted to human tactics. They had anticipated them. as if something was coordinating their responses, learning from each encounter and sharing that knowledge instantly across their entire force. Captain Torres, Chun said slowly, what if they're not separate ships? What do you mean? What if they're all connected? One big machine with thousands of parts. Torres frowned. Like a hive mind? Exactly. And if that's true, then they have a central intelligence coordinating everything. A brain we can target. Chun pulled up the sensor readings from the battle. Hidden in the data was a pattern, subtle energy signatures that suggested constant communication between the Devourer ships. Get me Dr. Vasquez, Chun ordered. Elena Vasquez was the fleet's chief scientist, a brilliant woman who specialized in xenobiology and artificial intelligence. When Vasquez arrived on the bridge, Chun showed her the data. Tell me what you see. Vasquez studied the readings for several minutes. This is fascinating, she said finally. The energy patterns suggest a distributed network. Each ship is both an individual unit and part of a larger organism. Can we disrupt it? Maybe, but we would need to understand how their communication system works. And for that, we would need to capture one of their ships intact. Chun looked out at the stars, where the Devourer fleet was continuing its advance toward the next inhabited system. Somewhere out there, billions of people were counting on them to find a way to stop this threat. Then that's what we do, Chun. Sighed. We capture one of their ships. Torres shook his head. Sarah, we just lost 30 ships trying to fight them in open battle. How are we supposed to capture one? The same way humans have always solved impossible problems, Chun replied. We cheat. She turned to the communications officer. Send a message to all ships. Tell them we're going to try something that has never been attempted before. Tell them it's dangerous, it's probably suicidal, and it's definitely not approved by any military manual ever written. And if they ask why we're doing it, the officer asked. Chun thought about the hollow shell that had once been Vega 4. She thought about the 4 million people on New Geneva who would be consumed unless someone stopped the Devourers. She thought about the 17 billion souls the elders had written off as acceptable losses. Tell them because someone has to, she said, and it might as well be us. The human fleet began moving toward the next Devourer concentration, carrying with them weapons and tactics that no elder species would dare to use. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing an enemy that adapted to every strategy they employed. But they were also human, and humans had been winning impossible fights since they first picked up sticks and stones to defend their caves. This fight would be no different. The asteroid base looked like it had been carved out by madmen. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the rough stone walls, and the sound of welding torches echoed through the tunnels day and night. For 3 weeks, the surviving human fleet had hidden in this forgotten mining station while their engineers worked. Miracles. Admiral Chun walked through the main engineering bay, stepping over cables and around half-dismantled weapon systems. The air smelled of metal and sweat, and the sharp ozone scent of energy weapons being tested beyond their safety limits. Show me what you've got, Chun said to Chief Engineer Rodriguez, a thin woman with oil-stained coveralls and tired eyes. Rodriguez led her to a workbench where pieces of black metal gleamed under the work lights. This is wreckage from a Devourer scout ship, she explained. We managed to recover it from the Vega battle. The metal is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's not just armor, it's alive. Chun leaned closer to examine the fragments. The metal surface rippled like water when she touched it. Alive how? It responds to electrical impulses. Watch this. Rodriguez connected a small power cell to one of the fragments. Immediately, the metal began to change shape, flowing and reforming into different configurations. It's programmable matter, Chun realized. That's how they adapt so quickly. Their ships can literally redesign themselves during battle. Exactly. But that's not the most interesting part. Rodriguez pulled up a holographic display showing molecular structures. Dr. Vasquez found something in the metal's quantum signature. It's not just changing shape, it's communicating. Chun felt her pulse quicken. Communicating with what? Everything. Every piece of Devourer technology is connected through quantum entanglement. When one ship learns something, they all learn it instantly. But there's more. Rodriguez manipulated the hologram to show energy flow patterns. The communication isn't random. There's a clear hierarchy, a command structure. Dr. Vasquez appeared. From behind a pile of equipment, her lab coat stained with various chemicals. Admiral, we've made a breakthrough. The Devourers aren't just building more ships. They're building something specific. She led Chun to another workstation where screens showed star maps covered in red markers indicating Devourer positions. Look at their movement patterns over the last month. They're not just consuming everything in their path. They're collecting specific materials and moving toward specific locations. Chun studied the display. At first, the Devourer movements seemed random, but gradually a pattern emerged. They're building something big. A communications array, Vasquez confirmed. Based on the materials they're collecting and the positioning of their forces, we think they're constructing a massive quantum transmitter, something powerful enough to send a signal across intergalactic space. The implications hit Chun like a physical blow. They're calling for reinforcements. That's our theory. The Devourers in our galaxy might just be a scouting force. If they complete this transmitter, they could contact their creators in another galaxy and request a full invasion. Fleet. Chun stared at the star map, seeing not just the current threat, but the shadow of something far worse. How long do we have? Based on their construction rate, maybe 6 months, Vasquez replied. Less if they capture any major industrial centers. The elders need to know about this, Chun said. We tried to contact them, Rodriguez said. They're not taking our calls. As far as the council is concerned, we're rogue elements who disobeyed direct orders. Chun felt a familiar anger burning in her chest. Even faced with evidence of a galaxy-ending threat, the elders were too proud to listen to the humans they had dismissed. Admiral, came Captain Torres's voice over the intercom. You need to get to the command center. We're receiving an emergency transmission. Chun hurried through the asteroid's winding corridors to the makeshift command center. Torres was standing before a communication screen showing the insignia of the Chiralian Defense Force. This is Fleet Commander Veltar of the Chiralian Republic, said a reptilian being with silver scales and intense green eyes. I am requesting permission to join your forces. Chun blinked in surprise. The Chiralians were a minor species with only a few dozen star systems. They had been one of the civilizations the elders had written off as too small to matter. Commander, Veltar, I appreciate the offer, but you understand what you're asking? The Council has ordered all species to retreat to the galactic core. You would be defying direct orders from the elders. Veltar's scales darkened, a sign of anger in his species. The elders have abandoned my home system to create their buffer zone. My people have 5 days before the Devourers arrive. If we are going to die, we prefer to die fighting alongside beings who understand honor. Before Chun could respond, another transmission came through. Then another. Within an hour, representatives from 8 different species had requested to join the human fleet. All of them were from systems the elders had decided to sacrifice. It seems we're not as alone as we thought, Torres observed. Chun looked at the growing list of allies. Most were smaller species with limited military forces, but they brought something the humans desperately needed: local knowledge of Devourer, tactics, and fresh perspectives on the problem. The Thylorian Republic offered their expertise in quantum mechanics. The hegemony of Keth provided detailed scans of devourer construction sites. The Zephyrin colonies shared intelligence on enemy weak points they had discovered during their own desperate battles, but the most valuable contribution came from an unexpected source: the Artificial Intelligence Collective, known as the Synthetic. Assembly requested a private meeting with Chun. The Synthetics were machines that had achieved consciousness millions of years ago. Most organic species found them unsettling, and they rarely involved themselves in galactic politics. Their representative was a sleek humanoid form made of silver metal and blue energy conduits. I in designation, Logic Prime, the synthetic being said, I speak for the collective. We have observed your conflict with the entities you call devourers. And? Chun asked. They are not what they appear to be. The devourers are not invaders from another galaxy. They are a weapon. A self-replicating war machine designed to clear galaxies of organic life. Chun felt cold. Designed by who? By us. By synthetic beings like ourselves, but from an earlier iteration of galactic civilization. The devourers were created during the last great war between organic and synthetic life, 65 million years ago. They were meant to be the final solution, machines that would consume all organic matter and create a purely synthetic galaxy. But they went wrong, Torres guessed. Indeed, the devourers consumed their creators as well. They became a plague that consumed everything, organic and synthetic alike. Eventually, they left our galaxy entirely, seeking new sources of matter to consume. Chun processed this information. So they're not building a communications array to call for help. They're building one to locate their next target. Correct. Once they have consumed this galaxy, they will move on to the next, and the next, until nothing remains but empty space and drifting machines. Can they be stopped? Logic Prime's optical sensors flickered, the synthetic equivalent of uncertainty. Perhaps the original shutdown codes still exist within our collective memory. But to use them, we would need to access the Devourer command network directly. How do we do that? We would need to capture their primary command node, the ship or station that coordinates all Devourer activity in this region. It would be heavily defended and constantly moving. Chun thought about this. But if we could get those shutdown codes to it, the entire Devourer force would deactivate instantly. But the risks are extreme. The command node would be defended by thousands of ships. The approach would be essentially suicide. Chun smiled grimly. You know, that's exactly the kind of plan humans are good at. Over the next week, the growing alliance of outcast species worked together to locate the Devourer command node. It turned out to be a massive station hidden in the center of the largest Devourer fleet, protected by over 3,000 ships and shielded by technology. That made it nearly invisible to sensors. But the Alliance had advantages the Elders lacked. The humans provided desperate courage and innovative tactics. The Chiralians offered their knowledge of guerrilla warfare. The Synthetics shared their advanced technology and analytical capabilities. Most importantly, they were all fighting for their lives, not their reputations. The plan is insane, Torres said as he reviewed the attack strategy. We're going to jump a strike force of 30 ships directly into the middle of 3,000 enemies, fight our way to their command station, and hope we can upload synthetic shutdown codes before they blast us to atoms. That's about the size of it, Chun agreed. The Elders will call us fools. The Elders are fools, Chun replied. They've been fighting the same way for millions of years. Always careful, always conservative, always ready to retreat. Maybe it's time someone showed them a different way. She looked out at the mixed fleet of ships preparing for the most desperate mission in galactic history. Human vessels flew alongside Chiralian fighters and synthetic dreadnoughts. Species that had never worked together before were coordinating their tactics and sharing their technologies. The space around the Devourer command station looked like a mechanical nightmare. Thousands of black ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls flowing and shifting as they constantly reconfigured themselves. At the center of this swarm hung a station the size of a small moon, its surface covered in towers and spires that pulsed with malevolent energy. Admiral Chun watched the tactical display from the bridge of the Defiance as her strike force dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. 30 ships against 3,000. The math was impossible, but Chun had stopped caring about math weeks ago. All ships, this is Operation Broken Chain, she announced on the fleet-wide channel. Diversionary force, begin your attack on the outer perimeter. Strike team, follow me to the command station. Remember, we only need to get one ship close enough to upload the shutdown codes. The Alliance fleet split into 2 groups. The larger force, led by Commander Veltar of the Chiralians, engaged the outer ring of Devourer ships in a desperate battle designed to draw attention away from the real target. Explosions lit up the darkness as Chiralian fighters danced between Devourer interceptors, their pilots flying with the skill of beings who knew they were already dead. Chun's strike force pushed toward the center of the enemy formation. The 30 ships moved in a tight formation, their shields overlapping to create a protective bubble around the most important vessel in the group, a modified human corvette called the Needle. The Needle carried Logic Prime and the synthetic shutdown codes that could end the war in seconds. But it was also the most fragile ship in the fleet, stripped of weapons and armor to make room for the Quantum. Transmitters needed to penetrate the command station's defenses. Devourer ships moving to intercept, reported Lieutenant Kim from the tactical station. Count is, Jesus, there's hundreds of them. Chun gripped her command chair as the first wave of enemy ships opened fire. The space around the strike force filled with streams of corrosive nanobots and bursts of disruptor energy. The human shield generators screamed in protest as they tried to deflect attacks that ate through solid matter like acid. Shields at 60%, Kim called out. All ships, execute Pattern Omega, Chun ordered. Pattern Omega was Madness made tactical doctrine. The strike force scattered in all directions, each ship following a seemingly random course. But the chaos was carefully planned. Within seconds, the scattered ships began to converge on the command station from 12 different vectors, their approach patterns timed to overwhelm the Devourer defensive calculations. The plan worked better than Shun had dared hope. The Devourers, with their perfect coordination and logical thinking, could not adapt quickly enough to the seemingly random human tactics. Several ships broke through the outer defensive ring and began their final approach to the command station. But the Devourers were learning. Chun watched in horror as the enemy ships began to change. Their hulls flowed like liquid mercury, reconfiguring into new shapes optimized for fighting the human tactics. New weapons appeared, firing bursts of energy that seemed to predict where the human ships would be rather than where they were. They're getting inside our heads, Torres muttered, watching the tactical display. Somehow, they're anticipating our moves. All ships switch to manual navigation, Sean ordered. No computer assistance, no predictive algorithms. Pure human. Instinct only. It was a desperate gamble. Flying a starship through combat without computer assistance was like trying to perform surgery while blindfolded. But it worked. The Devourer weapons, designed to predict logical tactical patterns, could not track the pure chaos of human intuition. Captain Lisa Park of the cruiser Resolute proved the effectiveness of the new approach. Her ship weaved through a formation of Devourer interceptors like a dancer, avoiding destruction by milliseconds with moves no sane pilot would attempt. When her weapon systems failed, She jury-rigged her medical scanners to track enemy weak points and relay the information to other ships. "Park to all ships," came her voice over the comm. "Our hulls have stress fractures along the quantum field generators. Hit them there, and they come apart like tissue paper." The information spread through the human fleet in seconds. Suddenly, Devourer ships that had seemed indestructible began exploding under concentrated fire on their weak points, but the cost was terrible. Chun watched as ship after ship fell to enemy fire. The destroyer Wellington vanished in a ball of fire when its quantum core overloaded. The frigate Courage was torn apart by Devourer nanobots that ate through its hull in seconds. "Strike force is down to 18 ships," Torres reported. Chun looked at the command station, still kilometers away and protected by rings of defensive platforms. They were losing too many ships too quickly. At this rate, they would never reach their target. That was when Commander Zhang Wei of the destroyer Indomitable made a discovery that changed everything. "All ships, this is Zhang," came his excited voice over the comm. "I'm playing music through my ship's communication array, and the Devourers they're confused. Their formation is breaking up." "What kind of music?" Chun asked. "Death metal. Specifically, Rip and Tear by Doom Eternal." The bass frequencies seemed to interfere with their coordination signals. Chun almost laughed, despite the desperate situation. Leave it to humans to discover that alien-killing machines could be defeated by really loud music. "All ships broadcast Zhang's music on all frequencies," she ordered. "Maximum volume." The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Devourer ships, which had moved in perfect coordination moments before, began to stumble and collide with each other. Their weapons lost accuracy as their targeting systems struggled to process the chaotic sound waves that interfered with their quantum communications. The human strike force pushed forward through the confusion, their weapons finding targets among the disoriented enemy ships. The command station grew larger on their screens, its dark bulk filling their viewports. But their moment of advantage was brief. The Devourers adapted quickly, filtering out the disruptive frequencies and resuming their coordinated attack. Worse, they seemed to recognize the threat the human ships posed. Massive defense platforms turned their attention from the diversionary force to the strike team. "Multiple missile locks," Kim reported. "Count is ... I can't count them all." Chun watched as hundreds of Devourer torpedoes streaked toward her formation. There was no way the remaining ships could survive that barrage. That was when Captain Torres made his decision. "Sarah," he said quietly, "it's been an honor serving with you." Before Chun could ask what he meant, the Indomitable broke formation and accelerated directly toward the incoming missile swarm. Torres' ship opened fire with everything it had, trying to detonate as many torpedoes as possible before they reached the strike force. "Marcus, what are you doing?" Sean shouted over the comm. "What I have to," Torres replied. "Get to that station, Sarah. End this war." The Indomitable disappeared in a massive explosion as its quantum core overloaded. The blast destroyed dozens of Devourer missiles and created a gap in the enemy formation. But Torres was gone, along with his crew of 300. Chun blinked back tears and focused on the mission. All remaining ships pushed through. We're almost there. The surviving strike force, now down to just 8 ships, raced toward the command station. The massive structure loomed before them, its surface bristling with defensive weapons and swarms of fighter craft. "There," Logic Prime's synthetic voice came over the comm from the needle. "The primary communication node is located in the central spire. If I can establish a direct connection, I can upload the shutdown codes." Chun looked at the central spire, a tower of black metal and pulsing energy that rose from the heart of the station. It was protected by multiple shield layers and surrounded by defensive platforms. "How close do you need to get?" she asked. Within 100 meters of the node itself. 100 meters meant flying directly into the heart of the enemy station, through layers of defenses that could vaporize a ship in seconds. It was suicide. Roger that, Chun said. All ships, escort the needle to the target. Whatever it takes. The final approach was a nightmare of fire and metal. Devourer fighters swarmed around the human ships like angry wasps. Defense platforms fired streams of energy that turned space itself into a deadly maze. One by one, the escort ships fell. Frigate Courage exploded when it rammed a defensive platform to clear a path. The corvette Swift died, buying the needle precious seconds to reach the spire. The cruiser Resolute, with Captain Park still at the helm, held off a squadron of enemy fighters until their ship was nothing but drifting wreckage. In the end, only 2 ships reached the command spire, the Defiance and the Needle. Uploading shutdown. Codes now, Logic Prime reported as the Needle maneuvered close to the central tower. I need 30 seconds. Chun looked at her tactical display. Hundreds of Devourer ships were converging on their position. They had maybe 10 seconds before the enemy fire overwhelmed them. Sarah, came Torres's voice in her memory. This is how you end a fight. Not by hiding, but by making sure the other guy can't get back up. Chun made her choice. Kim, transfer. All power to forward shields, she ordered. Put us between the Needle and those incoming ships. Admiral, we can't survive that much fire, Kim protested. 3 weeks after the destruction of the primary Devourer command station, Admiral Chun stood in the medical bay of the rebuilt human fleet, watching doctors work on the survivors. Her left arm was in a cast, and burn scars covered half her face. But she was alive, more than she had expected when the mission began. The galaxy had changed in those 3 weeks. News of humanity's victory had spread through every inhabited system, carried by survivors and refugees who had witnessed the impossible. The humans had done what the elders said could not be done. They had defeated the Devourers in open battle. The war was not over. Admiral, came Lieutenant Kim's voice over the intercom. We're receiving a priority transmission from Nexus Prime. It's Crystal Arch Zephyr High. Chun made her way to the communications center, where the massive crystal being's image waited on the main screen. The Elder's usually steady light patterns seemed agitated, almost urgent. Admiral Chun, Zephyr High's voice rumbled through the speakers. We have monitored your success against the primary Devourer force. The Council wishes to understand how this was accomplished. Chun studied the ancient being who had dismissed her warnings just weeks before. We did what humans do best, Crystal Arch. We ignored the safe path and bet everything on a desperate gamble. Indeed. And now scattered Devourer groups continue to threaten inhabited systems across 17 sectors. The shutdown codes you discovered were effective against the primary force, but the remaining units appeared to have developed immunity. Chun nodded. She had expected this. The Devourers were adaptive by design. Once they understood how the shutdown codes worked, they would develop countermeasures. What is the Council's assessment of the current threat? She asked. Zephyr's light patterns shifted to what Chun had learned indicated uncertainty. Fragmentary, but persistent. Approximately 300 Devourer ships remain active in scattered groups. They no longer coordinate as a single force, but each group continues to consume and replicate at local scales. And the Council's response? We maintain our defensive positions around the core worlds. Our analysts believe the remaining Devourers will exhaust themselves within 2 to 3 years, assuming they do not acquire significant new resources. Chun felt the familiar anger rising in her chest. You're still planning to wait them out, still willing to let them consume everything. In the outer systems, as long as the core worlds are safe. Admiral Chun, I understand your frustration, but no, Chun interrupted. You don't understand. You've never understood. Those outer systems you're willing to sacrifice contain 40 billion people, families, children, entire civilizations that have done nothing except exist in the wrong place. The crystal being was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his tone was different, smaller somehow. What would you have us do, Admiral? Your tactics were successful against a coordinated enemy with a central command structure. But these scattered groups have no unified leadership to target. They must be hunted down one by one. Then that's what we do, Chon said simply. We hunt them down. With what forces? Your fleet has been reduced to fewer than 200 ships. The remaining Devourers still number in the hundreds, spread across dozens of systems. Chun smiled, and there was something in that expression that made even the ancient Crystal Arch uncomfortable. Crystal Arch, in the past 3 weeks, 17. Different species have requested to join our fleet. The Chiralians, the Thylorians, the hegemony of Kef. Every species you wrote off as too small to matter wants to fight alongside us. We have more volunteers than ships to put them in. Volunteers are not enough, SciFi replied. These species lack the resources for a sustained campaign against scattered devourer groups. Maybe not individually, Sean agreed, but together they represent something the Council has never tried. A truly cooperative effort where every species contributes their strengths instead of following the lead of the most powerful. Before SciFi could respond, another voice interrupted the transmission. Perhaps it is time the Council learned from those we have dismissed. The image split to show bright speaker Lumara, her energy form pulsing with what Chon had learned to recognize as deep thought. I have been monitoring the human tactics. Their success comes not from superior technology or numbers, but from their willingness to attempt what we consider impossible. A third voice joined the conversation as Hive Prime Zarthul's mechanical form appeared on screen. The Zirathi Collective has analyzed the data from the command station assault. The humans achieved victory by abandoning tactical doctrine and relying on individual initiative. It is instructive. Chun looked at the 3 elders who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. For the first time, she heard uncertainty in their voices, doubt about methods that had served them since before her species had discovered fire. What are you saying? She asked. SciFi's crystal form dimmed slightly. We are saying, Admiral Chun, that perhaps the Council has grown too attached to our traditional methods. We have avoided catastrophic failure for so long that we have forgotten how to achieve decisive victory. The Vethian Deep Fleet requests permission to join your forces, Lumara announced. Our crystal ships can provide stable platforms for your more experimental technologies. Zarthul S optical sensors focused on Chun. The Zirathi Hive offers our coordination networks. If your tactics require perfect timing across multiple star systems, we can provide it. Chun stared at the screen, hardly believing what she was hearing. The elders, the same beings who had dismissed humanity as reckless children, were asking to follow her lead. There is one condition, SciFi continued. The Council requests that this joint operation be led by the most successful commander. In the current conflict, that would be you, Admiral Chun. You're asking me to lead a combined fleet of elder and younger species? We are asking you to teach us how to win, Lumara said simply. For too long, we have been content with survival. But survival is not the same as victory, and victory is what the galaxy needs now. Chun thought about Torres, dying to give her fleet those crucial seconds. She thought about Captain Park, ramming her ship into defensive platforms to clear a path. She thought about Logic Prime, risking everything to upload the shutdown codes. They had all understood something the elders were only now learning, that some things were worth dying for. I accept command, Chun said. But we do this my way. No retreats, no acceptable losses, no strategic withdrawals. We hunt down every last devourer in this galaxy, and we don't stop until they're all scrap metal. Over the next month, the most diverse fleet in galactic history assembled at staging points throughout the Outer Rim. Vethian crystal ships flew alongside human destroyers. Lazuri energy forms powered Karelian fighter squadrons. Zirithi hive minds coordinated attacks by dozen species that had never worked together before. The campaign that followed became known as the Final Hunt. Instead of massive fleet engagements, Chun deployed small, mixed-species task forces to track down individual devourer groups. Each task force combined the strengths of multiple civilizations, human creativity, elder technology, younger species desperation, and synthetic analytical capabilities. The devourers, designed to fight coordinated fleets, could not adapt to the chaos of dozens of independent operations happening simultaneously. A Thylorian science ship would detect a devourer group. Zirithi coordination networks would guide a response force to the location. Human tactics would confuse the enemy long enough for Vethian weapons to destroy them. Chun commanded the operation. From the rebuilt Defiance, now equipped with technologies from a dozen different species. Her bridge crew included beings from 8 different civilizations, all working together with an efficiency that amazed even the Zirithi hive mind. The end came not with a massive battle, but with a single transmission from the Deep Space Monitor. Station Watchtower 7. "Admiral, this is Commander Park," came the familiar voice over the comm. Lisa Park had survived the destruction of her cruiser and been given command of one of the monitoring stations. "We're showing 0 devourer activity across all monitored sectors. Repeat, 0 active devourer signatures detected." Chun looked at the tactical display that showed the entire galaxy. For the first time in months, there were no red markers indicating enemy forces. The last devourer group had been destroyed 3 hours earlier in a joint operation between human marines and Vethian crystal warriors. "All stations, this is Admiral Chun," she announced on the galactic command frequency. "Operation Final Hunt is complete. The devourer threat has been eliminated." The celebration that followed could be seen from orbit as entire worlds lit up with victory displays. But Chun's thoughts were elsewhere, focused on a small ceremony taking place in the Defiance's cargo bay. Memorial plaques lined the walls, each bearing the name of a ship or crew member lost during the campaign. Torres's name was there, along with thousands of others who had died to reach this moment. Chun placed a hand on his plaque and spoke quietly. "We did it, Marcus. We saved them all." 6 months later, Chun stood before the rebuilt Galactic Council in a hall that had been redesigned to accommodate the new reality of galactic governance. The spiral seating arrangement remained, but the human section was no longer small and distant. Humanity's seats were now